Alright, welcome to the Quirky Inquiry. Super excited to record this video. I've been tweaking around the setup for really the entire morning, and finally I am here with something that I'm happy with. So, today's topic is going to be creativity and the Commonplace book. How are these things interconnected? How do one relate to another? And how can we exactly utilize the Commonplace book for creative artists to express their thoughts, to express their ultimate crafts? How do the two link together? So if you're a follower of the Quirky Inquiry, you would have heard this phrase ad nauseum at this point. You need to keep a Commonplace book. And a lot of people are not sure, a lot of people aren't really sure why. I mean, I can sort of see the value of having a repository of all of my knowledge in a log somewhere, in a digital repository somewhere, or in a physical repository somewhere. But what's the point of keeping all these notes? What's the point of it? What's the point of collecting a bunch of Shakespearean smart-sounding quotes? And what's the point of just collecting quotes out of a philosopher's book? I mean, in the past you talked about raw memorization is not that beneficial to one's learning, right? Yes, I said that. But if you're merely using your Commonplace book for the purpose of just documenting everything down, kind of like a laundry list, then you're using your Commonplace book wrong. So today's kind of like a correction, course correction in terms of what you actually need to be doing with your Commonplace book. So to circle back to that Commonplace book argument, we first of all have to talk about creativity. Now, here's a misconception that a lot of people have about creativity and creative people, which is that when you think of a creative guy that has a lot of ideas in their minds, that can conjure these ideas up and that can materialize and actualize these ideas, you think of someone like Einstein or Picasso, and there's this fart at the back of your brain which basically tells you, or basically informs you, and basically tells you and informs you that these Einstein people and these Picasso people, they are geniuses that can just pull creative ideas out of their ass, out of nowhere. They are touched by God in some way that makes them this fashion, you know? That guy from YouTube that I watch on a daily basis, that Peter McKinnon guy, you know how he's got a lot of crazy creative ideas. You know, I wonder where he got all those ideas from. I reckon he's just one of those guys that can pull raw ideas out of their ass. That's the common reaction when we see creative geniuses, creative artists. Now, there's a big problem with that conception. On one hand, it's a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset is where you assign yourself an archetype and you assign other people an archetype and somehow believe that it is impossible for you to change your identity in any ways. It is somehow just fixed. You're just this Asian guy that's not very good at math, that isn't very passionate about, you know, what Asian people should be passionate about. Instead, you're a fixed guy, you know. So what this does is that limits your capacity to grow. That limits your capacity to be the person that you ultimately want to be. And I don't exactly want to get sidetracked into fixed versus growth mindset here. I should have dedicated an episode to that. But here's the trap where people fall into when they look at creative people and they sense that something's fundamentally different about that guy. Of course there's something different because he's creative, but something tells them, that fart at the back of their brain, it tells them that, oh, he's just that way and he can materialize ideas out of nowhere. That's just something inherent to that guy. Now, in reality, in truth, to clear up this misconception of creative people pulling idea out of their asses, let's talk about where these people actually get their ideas from. In a previous episode where I talked about how to understand philosophy, I mentioned a point which is context and history are really, they take dominance over the individual's power to create. Every philosopher, they belong to a period in history. Every writer, they belong to they belong to a certain era of history, and they belong to a certain social order that contributed to their overall formulation of their ultimate masterpiece. It is not really the case that individuals are atomistic. It is the case that individuals are a product of their surroundings, of their upbringing, of their childhood, and a very special period in history. In that sense, I also talked about how philosophical works, they are not atomistic philosophical books just floating around in the ether. In fact, every piece of philosophical works are products, rebuttals, or advancements, or improvements upon some other philosophical works. So really, it's quite hard to come up with something completely original. Every philosopher's work is interlinked with so many other philosophers' work. And here's the claim. Creativity is merely a product of weaving together subtle interconnections between different sources of inspiration. Creativity is merely a product of the association between different sources of inspirations that you personally take. Now that's creativity right there. Isn't really about you pulling some fancy idea out of your bum without any input, tabula rasa. You know, the purest form of creativity is the creativity of that of a child. But really, if you want to be honest about it, you need certain inputs. Take a look at the most creative YouTubers on the internet. Casey Neistat. He certainly has some inputs from earlier influences from some of the filmmakers that he had admired. Peter McKinnon, Cody Warner, they've all taken inspirations from other artists, and they took that thing, they sort of improvised it, they sort of improved it, and at the end they come up with their own thing. So here, input here is very important. Input determines what creative outcome that you're going to end up with. What inspires you has a direct contribution to what form of art that you're going to produce later on. For example, take myself for example. Quirky Inquiry, all the episode ideas aren't just being pulled out of a giant machine of ideas that I have in my garage somewhere. In fact, it is a different sea of association of ideas. I've taken inspiration from Leonardo da Vinci. Presentation style had taken inspiration from Leo Gura from actualize.org. Been taking some cinematography inspiration from people like Matt Diavella, Peter McKinnon, and also Cody Warner. And then a lot of the content that I talk about, I've taken inspiration from multiple sources of philosophers, from social studies, from books, from self-help books, from psychology books. So you see, Quirky Inquiry isn't just some thing that I just pulled out of a giant idea-generating machine. But Quirky Inquiry is a merely association of different ideas where the overlaps of those ideas somehow constructed something that other people had never seen before. Renaissance man, everybody know the term, but no one had ever thought about creating videos about how to become a Renaissance man. There's no explicit thing out there that serves as a documentation of someone's journey of wanting to become a Renaissance man. Cinematography, we all know cinematography, but when we overlap cinematography with that idea of personal development, something new emerges. See, the pattern here is that innovation comes from various overlaps from different fields, various overlaps of different inferences, and various overlaps of artists' original inspirations. I was very inspired by Leo Gura. But also, I want to hone in on cinematography skills, so I was very inspired by Matt Diavella, very inspired by Peter McKinnon. And of course, my core inspiration comes from the Western philosophers, so all the content that we talk about here, all the inferences that we're drawing in this video are kind of leaning on the shoulders of giants here. It is very rare, or should it be ever possible, that an individual can come up with something just right off the bat. It's very not possible for a child to draw something extraordinary has he not taken art classes, has he not practiced. Well, you could argue that tabula rasa is the state where an individual is the most creative, but if you give a 2-year-old toddler a pen and ask him to come up with an artful masterpiece, it's not that possible. It is only through training, only through exposing this toddler to a multitude of different ideas. Oh, Jesus Christ, my lighting. His setup isn't working that well. It is only through the process of exposing the artist to a multitude of different ideas, different inferences, different practices, can he ultimately become a person that's proficient in finding the overlaps of these sources of mediums. And those overlaps are their original ideas. So yeah, wait a minute, Robin, wait a minute here. You've lost me. How does this thing connect back to the idea of a commonplace book? Well, if you've been listening intently, you should be able to piece out something already. The reason why you keep a commonplace book is not to keep a backlog of quotes that you can show off to people. The reason that you keep a commonplace book is to keep the inferences. Keep the inferences. Remember, creativity is all about drawing inferences between different fields of studies. And for me, my creativity mainly relies on the idea to interconnect different ideas. So in my commonplace book, you're going to see a lot of ideas floating around. You're going to see a lot of quotes from philosophers, from plays, from ancient Greek dialogues, from Sophocles, from various other beautiful plays out there. I like to collect this stuff. But that's just my creativity. Yours is different. If you like to paint, collect other paintings that you admire. Collect other sources of inspiration that you admire. Once you collect it and you keep it in a backlog, something magical starts to happen. When you tend to run out of creativity, there's always a source for you to go back to. There's always more inferences to pull. If you don't have that backlog, then you're just running this creative process by fluke luck. You're trying to get an idea, but nothing comes up. But if you somehow has a repository of inferences and inspirations, those inspirations are gonna serve you in your process of interconnecting them, and it's gonna aid you in the process of finding those overlaps. And those overlaps are usually your creative ideas. Those overlaps are usually what produces a great piece of work. A great piece of something, a great piece of artistic expression. Those overlaps are, in a sense, what makes up a good artist. Is your ability to integrate multiple different sources of inferences together into a cohesive piece of creative work. And it is only through keeping a backlog of all those inferences can you become proficient. And this is a skill that must be developed. Connecting ideas together isn't that easy. But the best thing that you can do right now is to keep a commonplace book as an artist or as a thinker, as a student, where you can start to draw different inferences together across disciplines and across different various mediums of art. So at the end, just want to remark this. The reason why you keep a commonplace book is to draw inferences between multitude of different inputs. It's not possible to be a great artist without some amount of inputs. In fact, the more input that you get, the more variety that you get, the more creative you tend to become. That's why I favor reading so much, and that's why I favor keeping a commonplace book as I read. So I can draw those inferences and come up with something new and refreshing. So, that is it for this video. Hope you guys liked it. Sorry about the light incident. Don't want to edit this video whatsoever because I'm lazy. Because I just want to communicate my ideas on the spot, and light falling over isn't really something that I can control. If you believe in a deterministic universe, that's the sort of thing that you argue. But nevertheless, kind of running over time now. Where I'm here from the Quirky Inquiry, I shall be signing off right now.